Hello, everyone. I'm Justin Warland. I'm a correspondent at Time Magazine. Thank you so much for joining us today for this iteration of the Race to Zero Dialogues. We have a very exciting program today, and we're focusing on oceans, sustainability, and technology, specifically looking to answer the question of how oceans' potential can be harnessed to help tackle climate change. I just want to note that this session is being live streamed and recorded. And also we were going to start with some opening remarks, and then we're going to go into a panel discussion that I will moderate, but we also have the ability, it's an interactive session, so we'd love for anyone to contribute their questions. You can do that on slido.com. The information, as you can see, is on the screen here. And the event code is #RaceToZero. So again, this is for the moderated panel that follows the opening remarks. Please do contribute your questions. And so with that, I want to just start off with our opening remarks. And we have to start Stan Rowland, who is the Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of the Blue Climate Initiative. Thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Justin. My name is Stan Rowland, and I'm the CEO of the Blue Climate Initiative and Chairman and President of Tetiaroa Society, which is an environmental nonprofit operating in the island of Tetiaroa in French Polynesia. And the Blue Climate Initiative is a global effort to protect the ocean and to reasonably and responsibly use the incredible power of the ocean to address some of the most important environmental challenges and ultimately social challenges of our time. So today I want to set the stage for the discussion that follows. But first, I just can't resist saying how absolutely thrilled and delighted I am that we now have removed one of the biggest roadblocks we have in the race to zero, which is the Trump administration. This historic change brought by the US election clears the road ahead of us. And with the Biden and Harris administration coming on board, the opportunities are absolutely tremendous. And so this is now really up to us to make it happen. There are a variety of opportunities for success in the battle against climate change. And one opportunity that we believe deserves more attention is ocean-based solutions. The ocean provides an enormous opportunity to help turn the tide on climate change, whether directly through carbon capture and sequestration or more directly through programs such as harvesting its potential as a source of renewable energy or lower carbon food. And a lot can be accomplished simply by protecting the oceans. Restoring the oceans can help restore planetary health and our own health and well-being. So what are we at the Blue Climate Initiative doing in this regard? First off, we're doing cutting-edge research and private investment to advance innovative ocean solutions. What we're trying to do is use new technologies and scientific understanding, plus traditional knowledge, to work alongside the ocean's own absolutely miraculous natural systems to harvest the ocean's potential to tackle climate change. So how are we doing this? We brought together from around the world some of the best minds on ocean issues to work collaboratively to identify and develop the most promising ocean-based transformational opportunities to combat climate change. These experts have met in 6 working groups addressing the issue from 6 different angles: renewable energy and marine transportation, nature-based solutions, food and energy, human health and well-being, mineral and genetic resources, and sustainable tourism. But now, how does one go about determining what are the most promising transformational opportunities? We think it starts with asking a very broad question that provides freedom to be bold and ambitious, which is really what we need right now. The fundamental question asked of each of our working groups was, what would you do with $1 billion and broad support to mitigate climate change and the target issue of your working group? Approaching climate change from this perspective allows one to think outside the box. For example, when in a different context, another marine biologist, Doug McCauley, was asked the question of what he would do with $1 million to address climate change. Rather than coming up with a more expected marine biology-based answer, he said that he would invest in energy storage. I'm knowing this not for the answer, but even though I think it's important, but rather to illustrate the value of stepping back and thinking about the issue from a big picture, impact-focused way. This approach also provides freedom to think about different types of solutions. So for example, one of the ideas coming out of our nature-based solutions working group is to designate the world's entire high seas as a marine protected area with specific use exceptions to be made on a case-by-case basis. Again, my point is not the concept itself, but rather illustrate the value of us all stepping back and thinking boldly, which in this case resulted in a suggested paradigm shift. So our working groups have now completed their transformational opportunities papers, and we'll be publishing them in the next couple of months. But the Blue Climate Initiative is not leaving the process there. Ideas are, of course, useless without action. So in this next phase we're bringing together a broad coalition of scientists, entrepreneurs, business people, investors, community leaders, policymakers, and influencers to assist in implementing and acting upon the ideas developed in the first phase of the initiative through the transformational opportunities papers. Another strategy we're implementing is using incentive prizes and community awards to generate ideas and accelerate action. In fact, I'd like to announce today that in January, we'll be launching an innovation challenge focused on ocean-based climate solutions with a minimum of $500,000 in prize money. So working together will be absolutely critical in the face of the existential threats we are facing. And I hope we all use this moment that aligns with this historic shift in the US administration to pool our resources and work collaboratively as a single planet in the race to zero. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Catherine Palmer. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this opportunity to give some opening remarks to this session. My name is Catherine Palmer. I am the Global Head of Sustainability for Lloyd's Register Marine and Offshore Business. So the words I would like to share with you today are predominantly focusing on the global shipping sector and how it is essential for a sustainable future as it meets both the demands of its customers and society, but as one of the many ocean users competing for space and resources, it needs to ensure itself that it is sustainable so our oceans remain healthy and productive. The key challenge that the industry is facing at the moment is exactly the same as other sectors and countries and society as a whole, and that is how does it decarbonize? And there's no doubt that the decarbonisation challenge for the maritime sector is going to be disruptive, it's going to be transformational, and it's going to affect all players across the maritime ecosystem. The evolution of both the energy system and the shipping system that is needed alongside the associated timescales of development, investment, and asset lifespan means that there are steps that need to be initiated now and work that needs to be commenced and carried out in this decade so that zero carbon energy can play a key role from 2030 onwards in order to be able to deliver a goal of net zero by 2050. The pace of this transition really relies on three key factors and the interaction between them, that is technology, investment, and community readiness. So this means from a technology perspective, the advances needed in ships themselves is that they get their energy from zero carbon sources, and that also there is the development of the infrastructure to deliver this energy at the volume that is needed and in the right locations. And so therefore all actors need to join this global effort, ranging from the energy providers, the financiers, and the customers, alongside support from governments to ensure that we have a fundamental shift in policy and market incentives to increase the uptake of zero carbon energy. There's no doubt that decarbonising shipping will come at a price. It has been estimated that an additional $6 trillion over the next 50 years to achieve the IMO goals is needed, and that includes both from the ship side and from the land side, including production, storage, and distribution. And so when we see from a vessel perspective that the technology does exist today and we can build those ships, this is more of an OPEX challenge for the ship owner than it is for a CAPEX challenge. because we know that to start with, zero carbon fuels are going to be more expensive than existing fossil-based fuels that the shipping system is built around today. So although clarity is needed on fuel price and availability, as it's these primary concerns that are preventing any owners and charterers from ordering vessels today, we know that we need incentives in order to reduce the cost of technology and to build that business case. And so we see that this is very much a landside challenge, but shipping can be used as a catalyst for the wider energy transition in unlocking the market for zero carbon fuels because of the sheer size of the and scale of the challenge for the sector. And so there is a need to have confidence to act, and in order to invest to accelerate this shift. And in order to do that, we need to come together, not only to create a deeper understanding, but also to innovate and do pilots and prototypes and demonstrate the art of the possible in terms of safety, sustainability, and economic costs. And we know that innovation is already taking place. A lot of this is self-funded by ambitious business leaders, but also supported by governments. This innovation is taking place across the world from Europe to Asia and is very much focused on these challenges of ship technology, ship design, and producing fuels. And it's this coming together of like-minded leaders that is really gathering momentum at the moment. At the end of October, Lloyd's Register itself announced a partnership to accelerate the safe and sustainable transition to zero carbon shipping. And we will be working in partnership across the value chain for the benefit of delivering a safe and sustainable future for society. Another initiative which was launched just over a year ago was the Getting to Zero Coalition, which in its life of 1 year has really grown to unite more than 100 public and private sector stakeholders. This is a leading example of one of the many initiatives that have been launched to address this challenge, as everybody in the maritime ecosystem wants to engage and be part of finding the solutions. And so what we have shown as the shipping industry is that ambitious business action can create our own future. And as we now enter this decade of action to deliver our vision of commercially viable zero emission shipping by 2030, this is the time for collective action and collaboration. And it's a really exciting sector to be part of in this race to zero. Thank you.
Thank you, both Catherine and Stan. This, I think, does a great job of setting the stage for our panel, which we are going to jump into just now. I want to, again, remind people that they can ask questions on Slido when we get to that portion. But for now, I'm going to introduce the panel. We have Richard Bailey, who is the chairman and CEO of the Pacific Beachcomber and president of the Brando Resort. Jayotika Vermani, who's executive director of the Schmidt Ocean Institute. Claire Jolly, who is the head of innovation policies for space and oceans unit at OECD. And Marcelo Mena, who is director of the Centro de Acción Climática at Pontificia Universidad Católica de Valparaíso. And I apologize to Jotika if I said it wrong. I think that's right, Jotika, but please correct me if I'm wrong. My sincere apologies. I did want to start with you actually, and just to throw out the first question. You know, oceans are often thought of as the last frontier. You work a lot, I should say, the last frontier on Earth. You work a lot on you know, thinking about technology and that we need, and innovation that we need to better understand oceans. I wonder if you could just give us a sense of what you think we need to see to both better understand oceans broadly, but to better understand oceans in a way that can help us fight climate change.
Thank you, Justin, and good morning to everyone from LA. I actually just want to take a quick moment to acknowledge that I'm sitting at home on the tribal land of the Chumash tribe of Southern California. That's a really good question. Also, I just want to say, Justin, don't worry, my name is Jotica. I've heard all sorts of variations on the name, so thank you for—
I'll get it next time.
No worries. That's a really good question. So I think a lot of people don't fully realize how vast the ocean is, the scale of the magnitude we're looking at. It covers about 99% of the living space on this planet. It's such a massive feature for the climate system. And so part of the huge push in innovation that we really need to really understand it, most of it's not understood yet even, is unmanned, uncrewed and autonomous technologies, so that we can scale up and get a better understanding of what's going on out there. So with respect to, for example, climate, it was only 5 years ago when we got pH sensors to measure ocean acidification, to make lab quality measurements that were the same as if you brought water back into the lab and analyzed it. Bringing water back to the lab, of course, is very expensive. It takes ships. Having sensors that can do this now automatically, that you can leave it in the water for a period of time, really changes how we monitor for ocean acidification changes in the ocean, most of which has not yet been, we really have no clue about at the moment. So that's just one example, but that's what we're really heading towards, is being able to make these sensors and these technologies operate for us and gather the critical data we need to monitor and see what's going on out there.
Great. Well, I wanted to ask, well, first I should just say, please do, if anyone on the panel wants to jump in, please feel free to, but I'm going to go to Claire next, and I just wanted to ask a bit about some of the sort of innovations that might be helpful, not necessarily from a sort of, underwater perspective or on the ocean perspective, but innovations in financing, innovations in the way that we can think of policy solutions to help with oceans. What are some of the things that you're thinking about there?
So thank you very much for the question. Obviously, as we heard from the previous speakers, I think at the core of the two big challenges that we face today, namely climate change and the loss of biodiversity, the ocean plays really a key role in helping us find solutions. So not only do we need ocean observations, and we just heard that also from a previous speaker, observations of many kinds to improve our collective knowledge and contributing to fundamental science, but the ocean itself has become the siege of many environment-friendly innovations in terms of communications, transport, food security, energy. So maybe in terms of some of the innovations that may not be technological, but we published just a year ago, little less than a year ago, a report, an OECD report called Rethinking Innovation for a Sustainable Ocean Economy. And there we found that successful innovation into the ocean requires often really fresh thinking in the organization and the structure of the research process itself. So we studied at the OECD the emergence of new forms of collaboration in the ocean economy, often supported by governments, and that link the research communities, public sector, the academic world, the private sector stakeholders. And we use the example of innovation networks that have really sprung up in recent years around the world, dedicated to the ocean. So it's I have to say, it's really new. We found several dozens and looked already at 10 in particular, conducting surveys and workshops. So they are often hosted by a research institute or innovation centers, or they emerge from an existing industry cluster with a bit of public support very often. So they connect very different actors. They work on a range of innovations, typically marine robotics, autonomous vehicles, aquaculture, marine renewable energies, biotechnologies, and their benefits include improved cross-sector synergies, and I'm sure we come back to that at some point, access to research facilities, testing site. So one very important factor here that I would like to maybe stress is the development of the new science industry linkages in these networks. And that's pretty new in the ocean space, I have to say. And this is going to be crucial as we head into the United Nations Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. Both science and industry will need each other even more. And this can work just for, maybe people are not really aware that in over half of OECD countries, more than 50% of researchers are actually employed in business enterprises. So these new ways of cooperating in the ocean space are encouraged in part by increased digitalization. This allows more actors to know about each other and then to work together. We see co-creation models where the knowledge is jointly developed through shared facilities, mixed teams. We see also new open innovation models, meaning not everything is in a black box. New ways to balance commercial, intellectual property and research imperatives. So we see this in Europe, in parts of Asia, and in the US. We will actually have next week a workshop on these new ocean economy networks in North America with a large participation from Canadian and American stakeholders. This is co-organized with the Canadian Ocean Supercluster. So in order to conclude here, maybe just on this particular point, again, with some public support, we are seeing new networks being born. And I think that they really respond to some of the challenges that we are talking about here. So.
Great. I mean, I think, oh, sorry, please finish. I didn't want to
No, that's fine.
cut you off. Well, there's a lot of threads I think that are worth pulling out of there, and I think, I mean, it sort of segues nicely into my next question, which was for Richard. You talked about science and industry working together, and I know that this has been something that Richard, you are working on the ground. So I wonder if you might just introduce us to what you do, what your business is, and then talk a bit about those linkages in your business.
Very happy to do that. And yes, I'm very happy to be on the call and to join all of you. Thank you very much. My name is Richard Bailey. My business is hospitality in French Polynesia. I build and operate resort hotels. Actually, we have with one specific innovation, we won the race to zero. And it's a pretty nice place to be. We've pioneered a technology that we call seawater air conditioning, where we use deep sea water, which is very cold, to air condition one of our properties, the Brando on Tetero Atoll. It's a completely carbon neutral, self-sustaining, non-fossil with renewable energy resort. The seawater air conditioning is it's a simple process. When we put a pipe down to about 1,000 meters, we have approximate deep ocean water very near the resort. And the water is about 4.5 degrees. And we use that through a thermal exchanger to transmit the cold into a freshwater loop. And we air condition our entire property, and this reduces our energy requirement by about 2/3. And the balance of our energy is easily accomplished with solar and a small amount of thermal energy using coconut oil, which is a perfectly legitimate biofuel. It's a scalable process. It can be done pretty much anywhere in the world. The technological constraint is to have approximate deep sea water. The financial constraints would be to have a high cost of alternative electricity in order to bring the return on investment horizon into a reasonable scale, and a year-round need for cooling. Again, a financial constraint. So anywhere in the tropics with approximate deep sea water, and most island communities have high cost of energy to begin with. So this is a process that could be used in many different places. I believe we're the world pioneers for this process. We didn't have any examples to go on, but we sort of cobbled the various components together ourselves. It's not technologically difficult. It does require some investment, but it's profitable to us. It's the lowest cost per kilowatt hour of energy that we have. And I would add, as a resource, being deep seawater is more charged with carbon dioxide than surface water. And we're attracting a lot of interest from the scientific community because we can use this deep seawater to simulate surface conditions in, say, 25, 50, 75 years. And we know that the pH factor is gradually declining in the oceans due to acidification from absorbing all of the carbon dioxide resulting from climate change. And this acidification can have dramatic impacts on small ocean creatures, exoskeletal calciferous, plankton, and small shrimps and whatnot. And these are critical elements of the food chain. So using this deep sea resource can also inform us as to where exactly that threshold of danger occurs in vanishing layers of the food chain. So we're just one small resort on one small island in the Pacific, but what we've done is the innovation that we've accomplished has been motivated by the symbiosis in tourism that we're trying to achieve, whereby reducing our energy footprint, our guests are attracted, and the more guests we have, the more we can afford to reduce our energy footprint. So that's basically the story. It looks like I've watched my video.
Yeah, I think they turned off the video to improve the sound quality, and it definitely did improve. So I know I'm also dealing with a poor connection, so you might lose my video at some point, but for now we're good. But thank you for those remarks. There's a lot of threads to pull there as well. Marcelo, I want to turn to you next, and just to ask just about Chile and about the way in which oceans have been incorporated into thinking about emissions reductions and how that's worked on the ground in Chile.
Great, thanks, Justin. So it's incredible that for many decades we had ignored our oceans and the role it had on conservation, on carbon capture, on resilience, but also as an opportunity to shift our productive identity from one that is extractive in nature to one that generates renewable fuels as we require for the world to reach net zero. And just to start off, first off, we started trying to understand what was going on and justifying some things. And we had, in a way, a vision that this could be beneficial. Around 65% of fisheries in Chile are overexploited. You've heard about the Chilean sea bass, the orange roughy. These have really reduced their availability substantially, and we needed to conserve. And we went from protecting 4% of our oceans to 43% when I was in the government with President Bachelet as minister. And this really changed the identity of protecting, because this really led the charge for new efforts, which have this COP25 be the blue COP in a way. But with time, science has shown us that we were in the right way, in the right path. There's Professor Anthony Waldron from University of Cambridge University, has shown that conserving around 30% of the world, both oceans and land, increases forestries, the GDP out of forestry, increases agricultural yield, and of course it also increases fishing. because when you provide the space for fish to reproduce, you get all the overflow and you're able to recover species. This is about not killing the golden goose, the golden egg goose, but letting it give you the eggs at the time that it can, which is really good. But since we also wanted to show that we needed to protect the ocean beyond that as people, we started establishing the plastic bag ban. That, you know, so you can't have any plastic bags in Chile today. This is something that we hope other countries replicate. Some have started, and we started with the new introduction of, with the new minister of single-use plastics being banned, which is also very important, because however net zero emissions we are going to be, there's still going to be that plastic straw that we used back in the day, 50 years from now, even with a net zero world. So we need to clean up that plastic. But going from that, the important thing that we need to consider is what carbon capture could occur. And recently the World Bank put out a report shows that our fjords, our macroalgal forests are able to capture around 10% of our national emissions, which is good. That means we need to conserve them and keep the ecosystems resilient to natural disasters. You know, they dissipate energy from a tsunami. Healthy coastal ecosystems are able to recover faster, which is also good. But then we started looking at this new opportunity. You guys have heard about the renewable energy investments in Chile that have been very big. But as we see for the future, we start noticing that our copper demand will rise substantially because it's part of all the wiring of the panels of the turbines of the electric cars. Lithium is also going to rise in demand, but it has to be clean. And so therefore our copper, which is around 3 kilograms of CO2 per kilogram of copper, need to clean up. Around 2/3 of that is electricity, and renewable energy contracts are being signed by all the copper mines, and they're going to get to net zero right away with the scope 2 energy. But scope 1, the mining trucks need to clean up, and that's where green hydrogen comes in. And this allows us to also expand green hydrogen to be available for the maritime sector, for aviation sector. And so therefore, you know, we put out a strategy last week with the Minister Jovea, I was part of the committee, and which set out really huge numbers. I'll just give you a few. Going to export around $33 billion in green hydrogen is around 10% of Chile's GDP. It will potentially replace mining. Mining will subside, mining will disappear. These are finite elements. Hydrogen is not. So this allows us to shift from an extractive-based economy to a renewable economy. $330 million in accumulated investments. That's huge also. And this is part of what our net zero strategy considers, because we have committed to net zero by 2050, and we know that this will create more growth, more job creation, as a study that the World Bank commissioned for that recently showed. So this is really good so going from turning our back on the ocean and turning it into the opportunity for long-term growth and prosperity for our country.
Great. Well, thank you. I want to follow up with a question, and then I hope others will chime in as well. But you know, obviously, Chile, along with many other countries, has both an unconditional and a conditional commitment regarding its emissions. And a lot of the conditional commitment is contingent upon support from other countries. And I just wonder if you could talk a bit about the mechanisms, the partnerships that will allow Chile to meet those conditional targets, and you know, particularly with regard to oceans, but broadly as well.
Yeah, I think down the line, it's just a struggle that we have as a country, whether we are developed or we're on the way to being developed. I think is really that we have to consider. But I would say, that's the stuff that the Minister of Finance forces you to put in your commitments. It's not really true. You know, we have around $10 billion in investments going on today at this moment, being on renewable energy. None of that's GCF. None of that is Jeff. None of that is climate finance per se. It's our for-profit market design that makes renewable energy just work. And that's why Trump, despite all his efforts to go down with with coal, there's no new coal. And there's 20% increase in renewable energy investment. So it's just a matter of gravity. The market has spoken. These other technologies are obsolete, and we need to spend the money that we can. And when we need additional funding, we could go to a green bond that allows us to have the lowest interest rates that we have ever achieved since the recovery of democracy. So there's many things that we could do, and developing countries can also do. And that's what we have to do. Just be smart about the way you design and not really have a subsidized heavy system, but one that really allows the markets to work. But that starts with recognizing the price of pollution. If we ignore the price of pollution, none of this thing will actually happen.
Great. Claire, do you have any thoughts, or is there anything you'd like to add just about policy and support in that regard, not necessarily with Chile, but with countries more broadly?
Yeah, absolutely. And indeed, Chile is a member of the OECD and has been very active in all the committees of the OECD. So that's why discussion between developed and developing countries is still very much to be discussed, I would say, here, because Chile has been really leading quite a number of innovations, actually, even in the ocean space. So maybe what I could say in terms of some of the support.
So I would just say, I note that I sidestepped that debate by just referencing the NDC rather than trying to get into the debate. But sorry, please continue, I'm sorry.
That's fine. But in terms of the policy instruments that are in place, I mean, we have a whole catalog that we just published again in a recent OECD report on sustainable ocean for all. Whereas here you have a list of policy instruments that exist, and they range from economic instruments to regulatory instruments, typically tax, but also helpful subsidies. We always have to be very careful with subsidies, but quite a number of levers that government have in order to support innovation and to support innovative sectors. They already are well known in different domains like agriculture. Now they need to be really adapted and used in the ocean space. But there may be one little thing about this question of innovation and ocean. Very often where we will need the most innovations, and I think our colleague from Chile mentioned it, and our colleague here from the Pacific Island already had also a very good example. We need a lot of innovations at the ocean-land nexus, basically coastal zones. In order to reduce pollutions from plastics, we need to actually invest quite a lot in treatment system, pollution treatment systems. And that's true for many developing countries. That's where we need to invest a lot. And that will preserve the ocean and climate down the road. So a lot of the innovations that we think about are often really land-based and will benefit the ocean. And there too, you have a list of instruments that exist where you can encourage as a country, as a government, that or that innovations.
Great. Well, yes, please.
Can I add something? I agree there. Very much the innovations are needed in that ocean-land intersection, because that's where we all are. That's where we're polluting from. But I do think that we have to be careful on what those innovations are. So they're not just single-minded solving one problem, and then in 10 years or 50 years, we find that it's actually caused a different problem. And that's where we ran into an issue with plastics. So when plastics first came about 60, 70 years ago, it was, the solve-all, the be-all, the amazing new thing. And it's fine removing plastics, but then you have to take the whole cycle into consideration. So heavier material or like biodegradable plastic, for example, quite often requires very high temperatures. So it makes no difference if it ends up in the ocean, unless it's sitting on an hydrothermal vent, it's still going to be plastic in the ocean. So really look at the whole life cycle and all the impacts as we move forward with those innovations. And what is the repercussion and impact on the environment from multiple angles.
Well, I wonder if you could, offer, is there a good framework to think about those kinds of questions? I mean, is it a life cycle analysis, or how does one begin to think about that?
Yes, it is actually. It's very much a life cycle analysis, and it's part of what, the first speaker this morning was saying, was thinking outside the box. So remove something like how much will it cost? And then you really start to drill down once you've got that out of your head. of what the issues really are, but it is a life cycle analysis. So for example, going back to the plastics world, there are companies that are switching to biodegradable lids for coffee cups, and then there's others who've switched back because they've found that the carbon footprint of transporting the heavier weight material is actually offsetting the benefit of having biodegradable plastic. So it's really very much a life cycle issue. And I think, it's very complicated because we don't know everything about the oceans and what all the repercussions are going to be anyway. But I have hope because every year we learn more, and we're learning more at a faster pace because of innovation. So it's said that in the next decade, the UN Decade of Ocean Science, the technology we have will give us something like 10,000 times more data and information than we've had in the entire human lifespan on the ocean so far. So we will learn a lot very fast, very quickly. So I think it's building in that learning into the innovation process. And I guess, Claire, maybe that touches on your science and industry cycle a bit there as well, in making sure that everyone's well informed.
Right. Well, I guess first I'd love to move to questions. So please continue to submit them on Slido if you haven't. But I'll just ask, and here's the information about how you can do that. Again, the hashtag is race2zero. I'll just ask one more question for Richard before we get into questions from the audience, which is just maybe you could offer some perspective about how you think about or have thought about these, trade-offs or questions when you're thinking about implementing on the ground at your resort. How do you think? Who do you consult? How do you look at these questions?
Right. Well, we're guided, first of all, in my business by guest experience. So we're looking at what guests need to be comfortable and happy. If we take care of the guest, then everything else takes care of itself. Coming through innovations regarding energy and infrastructure, we're looking for solutions that are helpful to the environment, but are also profitable. We believe that, as I think Marcelo mentioned, we believe in ideas that are capable of mobilizing capital from the private sector without a lot of stimulus, because we believe that ultimately this is what will lead to massive change in the world. So innovations that are simply great technology that we invest in out of some deep conviction that this is the right thing to do is all well and good, but if the right thing to do is also the profitable thing to do, then the world really begins to change. So that's sort of how we think about that.
Great. So going to turn to some questions from the audience. This panel was focused in large part on innovation, but there's a good question, I think, that just points out that there are many solutions that exist already. To what extent does the panel agree that efforts might better focus towards implementing these rather than on innovations? And I guess maybe we'll start with Marcelo and then maybe Claire, but anyone feel free to jump in.
Yeah, thank you. So I do think that, there's a lot of innovations that we know how to implement, and we just need to scale them up. But I also, on the ocean plastics, for example, issue, I always had the clarity that, and I think we should have that clarity, there's some stuff we just got to get rid of. Single-use plastics, doesn't make any sense. Plastic bags, I mean, nobody misses them here in Chile. It's around 2 billion plastic bags less that we don't consume a year. It's huge. A lot of stuff you used to see everywhere. You used to have, almost 200 per person per year. And you see them everywhere. So the thing is really help people support the fact that you don't want to contribute to more pollution. And I bring this example when I was traveling in Rwanda. Rwanda also has a plastic bag ban. And, you know, in many developing countries, you see a lot of trash everywhere. This is the first country in Africa I've seen that I've seen virtually no trash in the streets. And it comes from the fact that you have this culture that you do not want to contribute. So I do think that there are innovations, and we have recycling laws, and you can do all sorts of cool stuff with technology and have, you know, clothes made out of, recycled plastic bottles, etc. But if you don't have put an end to the bad stuff, we're just going to be lamenting. And the reality is today we have, you know, tons, billions of tons of plastic going into the ocean, and it's going to be way harder to reduce that than CO2 in the atmosphere. So the thing is, that's why I think we had to make efforts into having both sticks and carrots to have the solutions be implemented in a timely fashion.
Great. Does somebody else want to jump in? Great.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that I have 8 resorts here in French Polynesia, and we've banned single-use plastics throughout all of my resorts. So, jump in there with that. One small step.
Great. Claire, it looked like you also.
Maybe one little point. And Richard, I'm sure we all want to visit you at some point. Yeah, maybe on this concept of innovation.
Please do. By the way, with COVID, we'll all be better off if you come visit us. I can promise you that.
I guess one of the key questions about innovation is, of course, do you really need it or not? In some cases, there's no other way. Typically, aquaculture has been around for thousands of years. Aquaculture has been around for thousands of years. However, now we're getting up to a scale of industrial aquaculture that we need to sort of try to master the problems. There are so many issues in terms of pollutions coming from this intensive aquaculture in Asia, but also in different parts of Europe and South America. So at the end of the day, some of the innovations are a bit pushed on us, and some incremental changes are needed just to make sure that we can indeed, again, master some of the large monsters that have been created. There's this quote from a French author called Saint-Exupéry: "Science without conscience is only ruin of the soul." So the big challenge with innovation is that you need to actually control whatever you're trying to do and make sure that it's not putting wrong impact, bad impacts on the environment at the end of the day.
Oh, please.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I think whoever asked that question is right on target. I think innovation should be used for where it can help, but there are solutions that definitely already exist. Planting trees, for example, is amazing and doesn't, you know, it does its job. It exists for a purpose. Bags, you know, in the old days before plastics, there was no problem with using material bags instead of plastic bags as needed. So I think it's really not going for the shiny object just because it's a shiny object, but is it really practical and useful?
Right, and I think so. A good follow-up in some respects to that is just how do we make sure that innovation doesn't exacerbate existing inequalities in ocean-based economies? And I open that really to anyone who might want to take it.
So I'm just going to jump in quickly. I think actually the intent is that innovation in some cases does help equalize, in the sense that as we improve on older technologies, things are getting cheaper, they're getting easier to use, which then makes it more accessible to more people, including citizen scientists, right, globally. But so there are now technologies out there that can be used. I'm going back to that ocean acidification sensors, for example. Before, you'd need to have a ship and go out to sea, and it would be very expensive, and you'd need to have a laboratory to do that. Now you can get a sensor and you can put it out and leave it there and gather the data in countries that previously have not had that opportunity. So Since 2016 or so, they've been deployed around across the Pacific, small island nations in the Indian Ocean, where there was 0 ocean acidification measurements before, off the coast of Africa, and even around Antarctica. So I think that's where innovation can really help to equalize the whole data gathering, at least.
Absolutely. Does anyone else want to jump in? I have one other question, but would love to hear others. Okay. Well, the other question is also in some ways a follow-up to the discussion we were having. Just, what's the role for regulation, particularly when it comes to oceans and maritime issues, where the regulation is a little bit more difficult than on land in a particular country. So Marcelo, you unmuted, so maybe you start.
Yeah, thank you. So first off, I think these global issues require globalism, which is a bad word in some places, but we do need to collaborate. We do need to work together on this. And one of the issues, and I know Max Bello, who is in the public, does a lot of work in that, is that we need to collaborate against illegal fishing, for example. A lot of the legal fishing fleets that come from Asia come into the Galapagos Islands, come into the Revillagigedo Islands in Mexico, come into Chile's islands, and we need to collaborate and we need to fight illegal fishing together. If we don't do that, if we don't have a mandatory way to regulate illegal fishing, we're not going to be able to do this. We need to cover, issues, the high seas, for example. High seas fishing is not profitable. It's highly subsidized, and we need to ban it out altogether. We need to have ecosystems be able to recover, and if we don't work together on this, it's not going to happen either. So regulations are very important, but also international collaboration is fundamental in this. And one last thing is, now we're starting to see oceans coming into the UNFCCC sphere. We're going to start recognizing the efforts that we can do to protect our oceans as a way to either mitigate or adapt to climate change. But we need better science to make better decisions on that. So that would be the basic vision on this. And it's great that now in the US, we will have a player that will come back and collaborate with us into these big global goals that we need to achieve.
Great. Yes, we have.
I would add that, sorry.
I was going to say it would be a closing remark because we're just out of time, but I don't want to cut you off, so please go ahead.
I was just going to say that the oceans, the global oceans, are a huge common area, and regulation is absolutely necessary on a global scale, which is difficult. We have the Treaty of the Seas. It requires cooperation among nations to avoid the tragedy of the commons. The oceans are plundered. They're simply plundered and they're polluted, partly because the highly evolved apex predator species on the planet, humans, is a terrestrial creature, not an ocean creature. We don't understand the oceans. And so we don't care about them the way we should. And being a huge common area, it really requires global cooperation and regulation. And without that, we're going to eventually be 10 or 12 billion people on the planet, and it's going to cause irreversible damage if we don't get our act together.
Well, that is a good note to end on. I want to thank all the panelists. I thought that was a very interesting and enlightening discussion. Thank you all for doing that, for taking the time. Next, we are going to move on to some inspirational remarks on innovation from Veronica de la Cerda. She's CEO of Tricyclos. I hope I got that right. But Veronica, thank you.
Hi, Triciclos.
Triciclos, sorry.
Triciclos. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me here. I'm actually Veronica de la Cerda. I'm the CEO of Triciclos. I'm thrilled and very honored to be here. It was a very interesting panel. And I'm here to share with you how we in Triciclos are contributing to the health of our oceans and this race to zero, right? We are in fact committed to achieving net zero emissions by 2030. We started more than a decade ago with a clear purpose, which is eliminate the generation of waste. And we've been doing so here from Chile, where I'm located, but also in many other countries in Latin America. Considering that back then, right, there weren't any EPR or similar systems to control and manage recyclable waste here in Latin America, we started with a very focused approach on downstream, helping divert waste streams from landfills or nature, right, towards a more sustainable end. We implemented pre-recycling stations located in commercial and public spaces where people could bring their own recyclables, separate them, and our team could send them directly to the recycling plants. We expanded throughout the entire country and also moved to Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica. We're starting Mexico now, managing what ended up being the biggest recycling station network in Latin America. We have sent more than 40,000 metric tons of materials to recycling plants that otherwise could have ended up in the nature or in landfills. But the main purpose of these stations was to create a conversation with consumers. So helping them understand the impacts of their consumption habits while they separated the materials, as well as learn how could they consume differently and consume better. We are a big corporation, and so we have a lot of interest in having a social aspect on what we do. So these stations were also designed to be managed by former waste pickers, giving them a secure space to work, promoting the formality of their work, and highlighting the contribution that they can actually bring to society after decades of experience in the field. Through all these years, we've encountered many difficulties, COVID-19 being one of those. We had to close all of our recycling stations to control the pandemic, so we were forced to innovate fast. We couldn't allow all those materials to end up in landfills or nature, so we accelerated the creation of a digital platform, an app, which allow us to create a secure place in the station by controlling access and guaranteeing sanitary conditions. But this also presented an opportunity for digitizing the educational component of our stations by providing it through the same app. Now we have thousands of users. We are adding new features to this app, like our previously developed recyclability index for packaging, and also giving consumers access to a circular marketplace, all designed to help them consume better. In Triciclos, we believe waste is a design error. And we've talked about this. It's in the designing process where the biggest part of the solution relies on. So in parallel to all this recyclable waste management business, we started helping companies to design out waste. We provide them with digital solutions to control and improve the recyclability of their packagings. We measure the impacts of their products along the entire value chain, like the ones mentioned before with the life cycle analysis, for example. And through innovation-led processes, we even help them question their own business models to make them more circular, helping move away maybe from recycling and stepping into all other layers of circularity. We are indeed moving ahead with one of them in a joint venture precisely dedicated to a refillable solution for home care products. And we're also helping delivery industry, very popular now, right, in COVID-19, in implementing a returnable packaging approach, starting from the food delivery in order to reduce the amount of waste generated through single-use packaging. We also know that there are many other barriers in implementing circularity, and they were mentioned here. This is not only about innovation, it's also about collaboration. It's about a systemic approach, collaboration through the entire value chains of products, and also collaboration with the public sector. This really is necessary in order to close the loop of all these different materials. As active participants and promoters of the New Plastics Economy Initiative from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, right from the beginning, we managed to gather key stakeholders of the plastic value chain in Chile around NPEC's principles while Marcelo was in office, which led to later the first plastic pact in Latin America. We're starting the same processes in Brazil, Colombia, and hopefully now in Argentina. Triciclos and many others are working very hard But of course, this is not enough. By collaborating as experts in the recent released study, Breaking the Plastic Wave, from the Pew Charitable Trust and Systemic, that maybe you already read it, we learned that with the current commitments, we will only reduce 7% of the annual plastic flows to the ocean. We're definitely not solving this issue yet. We need much more action, right? We need ambition. But we not only need collaboration and ambition, we need meaningful innovation. We were talking, right, about this in the panel. It's not just innovating in whatever. It has to be an out-of-the-box, socially conscious ideas from all parts of the world, and especially the southern part of it. We need to put the consumer or user in the center of the solutions. And only by doing so, we will be in the right track of solving this design error that is waste. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Indeed, very inspirational remarks. We're now going
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Did you miss my introduction before I started?
I did. I couldn't hear anything. I think.
Okay, I apologize. My apologies. I just after Veronica finished her remarks, I introduced you, Sheikh Ashan Ulatriq, and I apologize if I got your name wrong, but you are the CEO and founder of CubeX Global. And I don't know if the rest of the introduction was missed, but we're going to be hearing from the Uplink Sprint prize winners who work at the nexus of ocean and climate, fitting with the theme of today. So my apologies again for dropping out.
No worries. Hello, everyone from the sunny city of Dubai in UAE. My name is Sheikh Ehsan Tariq, and I'm the CEO and founder at CubeX Global. We started CubeX Global back in 2018, and it was at that point we were researching in the maritime industry, and we came across this problem firsthand that LCL shipments, putting cargo on LCL shipments is very hassle-some. And initially, we started with building a blockchain-based solution for organizing the documents in supply chain, across the supply chain from start to finish. And we realized and we pivoted that there was a bigger problem in this industry since the era of containerization. And that was that 100 million shipping containers every year go up to 40% empty, shipping empty year from one port to the other. And this is basically a $24 billion problem that the maritime industry has to, it's the cost of operating in its current business model. And this also produces around 280 million tons of carbon emissions, which is roughly about 55,000 empty vessel trips, which are extra and carrying no cargo. So we built an independent marketplace called CubeX Global. It's a B2B2C marketplace where we take this exclusive empty space, which is going to be shipped anyways. We put it exclusively onto our platform, and in a bidding auction model, different industry stakeholders from SMEs to manufacturers and even end consumers can then bid and buy these on spot onto our website. Starting in 2018, we launched our POC, and it was very successful. And by the end of last year in December, we launched publicly. And since then, we have seen that we have grown massively, because this was a fairly big problem that was faced by many SMEs and manufacturers. And back in April, we saw that due to the global pandemic situation, the entire supply chain was choked up due to vessels not reaching on time or manufacturers not being able to produce. and there was a lot of demand. Our demand went up by 3 times. So this whole problem is not just about this empty space which is being shipped. It starts from where and a freight forwarder books thousands of containers in advance, years, up to 3 years in advance on multiple different corridors and shipping routes. And it's bound, every container is bound against time, and every set container has a specific time when the doors will be closed and it will be put onto a ship regardless of its status being empty or full. And freight forwarders are running against time constantly to fill this empty space, and there's no independent marketplace or a centralized system where 2 parties from the same shipping port, going to the same destination can actually figure out that we're sending half-empty containers, then we can merge them. So QBEX Global came out with this marketplace, and we built the solution, and we've seen since early this year that our demand has gone up by 3 times, and we are right now struggling with supply. We're right now struggling with supply, and we're trying to fulfill this sudden increase in demand. Over the last year, we have also learned that there's a lot of interest from a marketplace perspective with regards to brokers who are actually booking shipments in advance through historical data. And there's a market within a market, which is the pricing and hedging and futures market. So from the start of this year till now, we have done in excess of 5,000 shipments, and we are very close to hitting the 1 million mark by the end of this year. And at the moment, we are running our Series A round of funding. We just closed our seed round of funding where the government of Oman invested in us. The UAE government has become a strategic partner, and we are talking to several other governments within the Middle East to help us with this initiative and have strategic alliances to promote this marketplace model, which not only reduces shipping port trips, but also has a massive impact on the marine ecosystem.
Great.
I'm open for questions if anybody wants to.
Well, I think I don't know that there's time built in for Q&A, but I'm certainly I'll take cues from the forum. But for now we'll move to Karen Schofield-Seal, who is the CEO and founder of Oceanium. Thank you, Karen.
Yes, thanks, Justin. Hi, everybody. Thanks for an amazing discussion so far. Really interesting. So yes, I'm CEO and co-founder of Oceanium, and Oceanium was started in June of 2018. That's when I was introduced to my co-founder, who is a biochemist. His name's Dr. Charlie Babington. He's located up at the European Marine Science Park up in Oban, Scotland. And I went to Charlie and I said, I want to make packaging from seaweed. And he said, that's great. I think we can do that. But there's a lot of valuable food and nutrition products in seaweed as well. So that is how the business model was born. And this is the business model here in a nutshell. We want to enable sustainable seaweed farming at scale. There's actually a different slide for that. But and the reason being is that seaweed sequesters carbon. It absorbs excess nitrogen. It creates, seaweed farms create a bit of a marine protected area so that the fish and the wildlife know that they can go there. There's no fishing or dredging. It so increases biodiversity. It's a fantastic source of healthy and nutritious food. It's full of vitamins, minerals, algae oils, proteins, and increasingly important with drought conditions and soil erosion. And unlike competing feedstocks, it does not need cleared land, fresh water, insecticide, or fertilizer. So for example, soya from Brazil, it's something that can grow locally and be consumed locally. So this is the business model. We will purchase fresh, wet seaweed from seaweed farmers, bring it into a biorefinery facility, which will be located near the seaweed farm, and using all green and clean chemistry and innovative proprietary technology, which Charlie has developed, we will extract the maximum value. So using all the different elements of the seaweed and extract protein and fiber and high value nutraceuticals, bioactives, which are good for immune systems and gut health. And then we use the remaining biomass to make a biopackaging material. It's not bioplastic. It is a all natural material that is designed to be home compostable and marine safe. And Ting, if you can, I can show some of the samples if you can put the camera back up. So where we are new, we are still in R&D. The next step is to prove the processing at scale. And then to do a demo biorefinery facility. The packaging material will be patented. We will be applying for patents going with that forward. And I think the important thing to remember here is, and kind of, I was really interested in what you all were talking about earlier in terms of the coastal zones, but also, innovative and making sure that, there's no unintended consequences. And I think that is something that we are really adamant about. I mean, we are definitely a social impact business. We're measuring our impact against 5 of the SDGs. We have 2 life cycle analysis in progression right now, and we'll continue to measure and report our impact as we develop the business. But it is really important to us that the industry grow in a sustainable and managed way, unlike other forms of agriculture that were mentioned earlier. And with thus, we are working, for example, with Lloyd's Register Foundation, UN Global Compact, Seaweed Manifesto, and also Seaweed for Europe. So really working with industry stakeholders, working with small scale farmers, to make sure that it works for everybody across the value chain. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Karen. Very interesting. Finally, we have Declan McAdams, who is the chairman of Pinovo, and who is our final Uplink Sprint winner today.
Hello. I want to explain to you today how technological innovation in a seemingly mundane area like rust removal can have a material positive impact on ocean health, strengthening and improving the ocean's resilience to the effects of climate change. So let's start at the beginning. Not many people realize that paint is plastic, and the industrial and marine worlds are full of steel assets that are covered in paint to protect them from corrosion. However, that force of nature, corrosion, can only be slowed down. It cannot be stopped. And as those steel assets corrode, paint residuals, approximately 50% of which are made up of plastic, fall into the sea as microplastics. On top of that, when the asset owner decides to repaint the asset, they must firstly remove the old paint and rust. And to do that, they generally use the traditional methods of either open grit blasting, which you see here, or high pressure water jetting. And the end result? Well, the old paint residuals, now crushed into microplastics, end up in the environment, and most often in the oceans, because those steel assets I spoke about are generally located in the sea, oil rigs and ships, over the sea, bridges, or beside the sea, oil refineries and shipyards. To put that into perspective, and taking just the 184 oil rigs in the North Sea, sandblasting and water jetting on those rigs alone cause paint microplastic emissions that are the equivalent to dumping 14 million plastic bottles into the North Sea every year. We estimate that globally between 1.5 and 2.25 million tons of paint microplastics are dumped into the oceans every year. Now compare that to total plastic weight of 8 million tons entering the oceans annually, and you realize that this is a very big but little known problem. So you might say, that's not good. Well, what has it to do with climate change and the race to zero? Well, very simply, Pinovo, a Norwegian company, has developed and patented vacuum blasting technology that will protect ocean health, reducing the impact of climate change on the oceans in 2 ways. Firstly, Pinovo reuses the blasting grit up to 20 times. This significantly reduces grit production and its transport, and in this way lowers the life cycle CO2 emissions by over 60% compared to the traditional method of open blasting. It may not be zero emissions, but it's a big step in the right direction. On top of that, we can recycle the used grit to give it more lives in future maintenance operations, further reducing CO2 emissions. Secondly, by stopping all those paint microplastic emissions entering the ocean, we protect ocean health and biodiversity, considerably strengthening the capacity of the oceans to mitigate the negative impacts of climate change. It really is that simple in theory. In practice, it's much more challenging to convince a traditional industry, surface maintenance, to change its practices that go back over 100 years. For that reason, we are very grateful to Uplink and the Forum for their support of our efforts to put the issues of paint microplastics and stopping open blasting over the oceans on the agenda. We need people to realize that paint is plastic. So next time you're driving over a bridge and you see someone repainting the bridge and blasting off the old paint and rust, ask yourself, how is the blasting being done? In a good old traditional manner where the grit is used only once and then the whole lot, including grit, rust and paint microplastic residuals are all dumped into the ocean, or cleanly with vacuum blasting, with reuse and collection of the grit and recovery of all the paint microplastic residuals for recycling or safe disposal. Even better, why not raise this issue at a political or regulatory level in your municipality or at a national level? The anti-pollution laws are already in place in most parts of the world. What's needed now is awareness, and you can play your part in making this happen. As I hope you've seen this afternoon, changing from dirty, traditional blasting to innovative and sustainable clean vacuum blasting can make a significant positive contribution to improved ocean health and to climate change mitigation. So remember, paint is plastic and stop open blasting over the oceans. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on. And it seems like we lost Justin, but we're going to bring up Atsushi Tsunami. We're so grateful to have you today. Thank you so much, Atsushi, for being here. And if you could please provide us with closing remarks. It's quite interesting that our technology and innovation session had so many technological glitches, but we appreciate everybody being here and we really look forward to your remarks. Thanks again for joining us at such a late hour in Japan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. And I hope that Justin will come back.
Okay.
Oh, you're here.
My apologies. I once again delivered the introduction. Oh, okay. Well, you've already been introduced. So thank you for joining us at 1 a.m. Please, sorry.
Hi, thank you. And I also thank all the speakers for sharing with us your inspiring stories about how you are promoting innovations for a sustainable ocean, including various important business models that you have been developing. And I think they're very important to have not only technologies and solutions to all the ocean, to create a sustainable ocean, but also the business models are very important to actually implement those technologies and to really create the innovations and solve the climate ocean problems. And once again, I'm Atsushi Tsunami, the president of Sasaka Peace Foundation, and also heads the Ocean Policy Research Institute in Japan. Our foundation promotes international partnerships for peace and prosperity and security, and our institute undertakes research for achieving a sustainable ocean. And I'd like to thank the high-level champions for global climate action and the UNFCCC Secretariat and the World Economic Forum and Friends of Ocean Action and all the partners for organizing and joining this session and giving me this opportunity to speak to you. And your stories have reaffirmed that the ocean is extensively embedded in our economy, and there are myriads of challenges and opportunities to address the nexus of climate and ocean. In order to further boost contributions from ocean-based sectors for climate change mitigation, we need to facilitate the transformation of the maritime sector as a whole through enabling policies and supply chain transitions. So we need to create co-benefits and synergies and provide incentives to innovate innovative business models through market measures, industry standards, and government policies and regulations. And today I heard so many good examples all over the world challenging these or joining this effort, spearheading this effort. And we need to accelerate the application of innovative technology to enhance sustainability through the life cycle approach. Effective local actions should be shared and scale up. So science is at the heart of the technological development and innovations. And technologies should also be available for adaptation to ensure inclusive and equitable development. The world is heading towards the net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And in Japan, Prime Minister Suga finally announced last month the net zero emission target by 2050. As we move towards the carbon-free society, ocean-based solutions have a significant role to play in filling the GHG greenhouse gas reduction gaps. Ocean-based mitigation options, including ocean-based renewable energy, may contribute up to 21% of additional mitigation measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. So our institute, OPRI, has a long-standing commitment to multi-stakeholder dialogues and actions to facilitate the discussions on ocean and climate issues at UNFCCC. We have been an active member of the Marrakesh Partnership and have contributed to the development of ocean and coastal zone pathway to achieve the net zero by 2050. To provide analytical building blocks for these efforts, OPRI is carrying out studies on ocean-based mitigation, potential focusing on wind power potential for seaweed beds as a new blue carbon ecosystem and climate resilient sustainable seafood. Each of us, whether we represent the national and local governments, business are experts or consumers, all have entry points and responsibility for taking actions and achieving sustainable ocean. In order to promote such multi-stakeholder dialogue, OPRI, along with our partners, is taking part in another GCA event, a virtual Ocean Action Day on 20th November, to raise the momentum for UNFCCC Ocean and Climate Change Dialogue scheduled from 2nd to 3rd of December this year. So much can be said about today's rich and inspiring discussions, and I hope that we can continue dialogue like this one to pioneer innovation for mitigating and adapting to climate change and achieving a sustainable ocean. We need to act expeditiously and must work together to bolster our actions. Thank you again for great discussions and hope to see you in person next time. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's Mr. Atsushi Tsunami, who is the president of the Sasakawa Peace Foundation and president of the Ocean Policy Institute at SPF. Thank you for those inspiring remarks, important remarks about putting science at the center of innovation and technological solutions. With that, we conclude the program. I thank you all for joining. It's been a really enlightening discussion. Thank you again.
The recording has stopped.